Hi, everyone. It's Lynn and Mary back with another episode of Tick Ed. So today we're going to talk about the regional education service centers. And Mary, how did you start to go down the exploration hole of
So,
the ESCs?
I knew a lot of people growing up that worked for the education service centers, and they did simple things or what seemed simple as to, educate the teachers just occasionally, but they came to the school district. And I was in a rural school district, and they would bring out the film projector because our school didn't have a film projector. And they would bring out movies for the school to use, educational films for the school to use. And so that was how I knew about education service centers, because I knew people who worked for them and I saw them in the school when I was growing up. Then during the pandemic and the lockdown, um, parents started seeing, of course, what really tuned everybody in was the CRT, the social emotional learning, the attitudes, the beliefs, the character, the value, and really even the state peeping into the home of the family. And they were alarmed, and they couldn't believe people that they knew who were teachers were involved in this. And so we started looking, where was this coming from? And lo and behold, we found that the summer training for the teachers out of our education service center was teaching how to implement cultural relevance, how to implement values, how to implement LGBTQ. Um, this was not supplemental education for them or supplemental training for them on how to improve reading scores or math scores, or, how to help somebody who has dyslexia. That was not, I mean, the full offering one summer, the summer of 21, was all SEL. It was all um, unbelievable.
Love.
I could go back and pull the list of the classes offered, because we actually had someone take the classes and record them. So we heard everything. And then when CRT, the anti CRT bill, the SB3 that Brian Hughes got through in the 87th, we saw that the Education Service Center was literally messaging to the school districts, "Hey, this bill is irrelevant. This bill, you can just ignore it. Like, don't do anything with it. It means nothing to you. You don't have to comply with the law. There's a loophole." And then through work in Fort Worth ISD, there's a board member there who works at the Education Service Center. And so she's basically sitting on the board and doing the bidding of the TEA, because TEA is basically controlling the Education Service Center, and it's a place for TEA to hide what they're doing. I just shared with you there was no transparency, so we secretly accessed it. And it's alarming. And I think it's 100% taxpayer funded. So, my question, and you and I have bantered back and forth about this, like, what are they doing? What are they hiding? And the more we see, the more alarming it becomes. So, that's where I started with Education Service Center. And I know that you and many other members of families engaged have have dug into and seen what individual education service centers are doing. And it's not something that the taxpayers would want to fund.
No. Well, and I was familiar with the regional service centers because there's one in Richardson on Spring Valley. It's up near the mosques and that whole Islamic area. And it's also near the RISD administration building. So I was aware
Mhm.
of it. I knew that the Region 10 service center was a place where teachers would go off to die when they didn't
Ah.
be in the
Mhm.
classroom anymore, and rightfully so. They've made it the culture and the climate miserable in our schools with
Mhm.
testing and just all the things that the teachers are having to do. And so they go off to die at the regional service center. So then I go down, and research all of the. Sorry, I just lost your screen. Hang on. Eh, That's so weird. I just swiped something on the, there we go. Okay. You went blank. Okay. So
I
the,
do that.
I went blank. Why, yeah, it made me log. Okay, so it came through the legislature, 1967. I think it was a bill in the 60s. And then so they set up these 20 regional service centers to service the school districts. They have 20 of them. Actually, Region 20 in San Antonio is a massive one. And so I was watching this video of their 50th anniversary, and there was a gentleman named Dwayne M. Estes, and his brother is Nolan Estes. Buildings have been named after Nolan Estes. Nolan's Dallas ISD, former superintendent of DISD. And so these guys are deep in the education space, education reform as well. So Dwayne Estes was talking about how it's one of his shining moments where he helped this bill get passed, and then he serves on the State Board of Education. So they had a cozy relationship back in the day, and the TEA was basically using these service centers to dictate a lot of the innovation is what they were calling it, innovation, which really just means technology and experimentation through technology. But also they would do the report cards. So there was innovation that was more on the back end of how the districts would do their report cards. So those obviously those efficiencies we wouldn't have an issue with. But what it's morphed into is a conduit for the TEA to steer contracts to ed tech vendors. So it's actually now the technology is more what the teachers are using to educate the students. And after decades of this, we're finding there's no fruit in it. But
Well, and Lynn, one of the things that we have been talking about a lot is the insecure internet access and how there's no firewalls and how the kids can get around. I mean, that is something that we talk about all the time. And as we're digging and digging and digging at TEA and at the Texas legislature about why is this happening? Why can they access pornography? And as always, we go local first. And, local is looking at us like we're crazy, like they're not doing this. And then I found out by going to some of the rural school districts, like Weatherford literally told me 2.5 years ago now, they said, our education service center provides us with the internet. They're the ones who have control over the firewall, not us.
well, and yeah, and so that's a good point. So there is a firewall, but the kids can bypass that. And more importantly, like what you were talking about, the training of the teachers. So we do know that that's where much of the indoctrination has come from because
Yes.
it's difficult to understand. A lot of times we point to the individual ISDs, blame them, but much of this comes from the heavy hand of the TEA through legislation. And then they are to deploy this or to adopt this, and they go through their ESC. So it's sort of like a command comm central. It's like a central communications for these districts. And so like my region 10 service center, they service 130 ISDs and 10 counties. So they're massive. You think about it, Texas is huge, 20 service centers, and you look at the map of that and how broad the reach is for each service center. So my superintendent, her husband actually, so Tabitha Branham came from Coppell ISD, and where they implemented failed one-to-one devices. So they ran her out. So now she's been in our ISD for 10 years, implementing experiments on technology a lot. She is an early adopter of a lot of bad things, whether it's social emotional learning or the ed tech. So her husband works in the data center of ESC. We also have a trustee, Megan Timmy, who, I think she's one of the better trustees because she's been a teacher in the classroom and a principal. And so she understands a lot of and a parent in our ISD, but she's over the teacher incentive allotment, which came from the commit partnership. That's the merit pay where they tie the teacher performance to the assessments and in the high stakes component. So it's a corporate reform that is undermining the classroom teacher, making it more of a competitive space rather than collaborative. So she has a conflict of interest working for the ESC and being on the board.
Okay. So a lot of what you're talking about just from your school district, though, it's insidious everywhere we look.
Yes.
And I'm going to go back to your district because in your district we have the blockchain Eric Reeves with green light credentials that's going out and selling this concept to the schools to get, what they are saying is just one silo of information on blockchain. And we've had these conversations with him, but the commissioner appoints the ed tech or the technology guy, Eric Reeves, who owns blockchain, who's selling this program into the schools to the Education Service Center. I mean,
Now,
he
let me talk.
serves on the edge. This everywhere you have so much nepotism and cronyism throughout the entire education system, and and I'll use, pull back the curtain. That was how Moms for Liberty, that was their opening entry to the political arena of education, was we're going to pull back the curtain. Well, in fact, the curtains do need to be pulled back, and there does need to be transparency. And if it's in the ESC, there's no transparency.
Agreed. And so, I want to go a little deeper on the green light thing because it's the perfect example of
Mhm.
a for-profit contract steered to
Mhm.
green light, and
Mhm.
a for-profit company steered a contract by TEA to green light. And so green light is like you mentioned, the blockchain wallets, and that holds their transcripts, their mental health data, and their physical fitness data through FitnessGram,
Yeah.
all set up by Kenneth Cooper in the legislature. So these bills pile on layers of requirements of the school districts, and so they're going to store it on this one convenient locker. They call it a life locker, and so what Mary mentioned, so Greenlight Credentials was founded by Eric Reeves and Manoj Kutty. Eric Reeves is Ross Perot's son-in-law, so he gets this nice contract. Manoj Kutty, being the co-founder, just went to India with the governor because they're pushing globalism through Texas and having these partnerships with other nations, despite the fact that Texas is on fire, not in a good way. I mean, our schools are burning, and our governor
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on his watch. He's been
Mhm.
the governor and had the appointed commissioner for. Let's see, this month will be. Is it 8 years? uh let's see, what are we in 2025? 9 years, I believe.
Yeah. Mhm.
So since he's appointed the education commissioner, but Mike Morath steered the contract to Greenlight. And then I looked at the TEA, the for fiscal year 2024, TEA paid Region 10 service centers $234 million. And you can go on the TEA website. For some reason, the some of the previous years are dead links, and so you can't see it, but you can go to TEA, type in check register, Google that, and it'll pull up, and you can do it alphabetically. Now, if you look at the commit partnership, it's under T, not C, but the ESCs are also paying the commit partnership in some of the other regions, and that's a nonprofit that chose Greenlight to be the
Okay. I,
blocker.
I just want to make sure everybody caught that,
Yes.
because that they have commit filed alphabetically under T for the commit, and not. So again, that just shows
Deception.
you
Just
how
constant deception. Yes.
it
Or
is.
spell
Yeah.
something wrong. We've seen that where they spell just one letter off and you can't find it. But think about this. So if the ESCs are 99, they have 990s, which is
Right.
they're established as a nonprofit. So
Right.
they have an EIN number, and they have so employer identification number. They have
Right.
990 they're supposed to produce every year, which is supposed to be public. So you could literally walk into there and say, I, as the public, demand to see your 990, and they would have to produce it. They also are required to produce a CAFR. So that's their annual financial report. Our districts also do CAFRs, but that CAFR is supposed to be produced. And instead of releasing it and having it public, where some of them are, some of the some of the ESCs do have it on their website. Region 10 does not. So I would have to file a public information request to get that information. Also, and you and I are all about solutions and calls to action. What we would ask for is a federal single audit on the
Yeah.
ESCs, because they also take grants, which are bribes to get them to roll out some of these reforms and things. Head Start runs through our
Yes.
ESC. There
Yeah.
are other federal grants. Also, Judith Kaufman, we busted her back last year because Judith Kaufman works for Region 10 and she was showing up at Waxahachie ISD when we were there to speak out against the Amplify.
XFI. Mm-hmm.
And that's high quality instructional materials, is what they call it, HQIM. So Judith was there to promote and train on HQIM. And she revealed to me when I called her that day before the meeting, she thought I just worked for a district. I told her, she said, "What district are you in?"
Right.
Richardson. And she told me that they get 3 grants if they adopt Amplify, which is the now called Texas Bluebonnet. If a district adopts that, they get up to 3 grants. And for my district, it would have been 2.25 million for the first grant, 500,000 for the second grant, and 300,000 for the third grant. So this money came from House Bill 1605 through the legislature, through a fiscal note that then that deal is laundered through the ESC. It's a conduit for this
Okay.
corruption. Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
You're
And
welcome.
I want you to take that and I want everyone to reflect on the hit piece that TPPF did about how our schools are overfunded.
Yes.
Okay. That
That's
our schools
great.
are funded plenty and he's talking about all of that, but he doesn't include the technology, the expense of the technology. And he doesn't talk about how much money we're spending at TEA. And there's no mention of the education service centers. And there's no mention of these tax funded grants.
Love it.
And and so and again, I want us to talk about that in another ticket because it's very important. But people need to see that these are not isolated. What is happening from the state is not isolated. And I'm going to
I'm
say,
sharing the screen because I want to, yeah, that's
yeah,
actually that is a great ticket that we should do because the video from TPPF is great because it does
yeah,
go into
funding.
the funding. And so,
Uh-huh.
okay, stay tuned.
So, but I want to go back to the ESCs. Why nobody's talking about the ESCs? We're talking about the ESCs,
Right.
and I want to say what right now. I've been on a rabbit hole after a couple of other agencies, and it's been nauseating to me because and I posted on Twitter. I said, Texas is failing because our agencies are failing. And
Right.
this cannot happen much longer before the state looks like California. And the messaging out of Austin can be, we have all this money, but all the institutions that are absorbing the money are failed. And they do not adhere to any good for the public. And that the
Yeah, there's no
state,
fruit.
there's no fruit. The state can, I mean, the justification for a government is to serve the people. And it's not. It is serving itself and creating wealth. And it is a misuse of funds. And Lynn,
Yes.
every case that there is this grotesque failure is because the agencies are run by appointees. So I would say a couple of things. Not only do we have to get back to fiscal transparency, because we just talked about the money in your district. If we made a list, and maybe we should make a list, how much money and how much the budget, how much more we're funding each education service center. I mean, Marianne Jackson's education service center has more than quadrupled in 1 year in what TEA is sending them. Now we know why, but I mean the money, it's unbelievable. But we have got to say to our legislature, end the appointments. As long as our governor has carte blanche, our governor who appoints Democrats to head up agencies.
Right.
Meanwhile, we're having a showdown across the
Right.
state about
Well,
Democrat
Democrat chairs.
appointees.
Right.
Yeah,
With Bill
Democrat
Manchin,
chairs.
our own governor,
Yeah,
appointing Democrats too. Like,
yes. I
really
mean,
is
unbelievable. And
right. Theater.
so again, we're talking about education because we believe the kids deserve better, and we realize that the future of the country falls with uneducated. When we have an uneducated populace, a populace that is unable to read, there is no freedom. If you're not educated, you're not free. So,
I want to
uh,
I want to go because that made me think of, so you had sent me a screenshot of a conversation that you were having with this um I think she probably works for an ESC. They doubled down in their support. So it was
uh-huh.
um so I had done a call to action video,
Yes.
exposed region 20 and how how we got here. And just to be clear, our solution is, instead of going after the 1,200 school districts, we say abolish the TEA, and or at minimum go to zero-based budgeting so that you could monitor what the TEA is spending year over year and justify the contracts that come through the TEA. But abolish the TEA and the 20 regional service centers, return the money to the local ISDs and the taxpayers, because the money you save on the wasteful experiments and technologies running through there and all the grants and laundering and steering of contracts, pay the teachers, train them with the money saved on that, and then the rest that's left over, which is millions or billions, then you return that to the taxpayer. So we're trying to get property tax relief. This is one way to do it. But I bring this up because this woman says, you have no idea what you're talking about. I have attended countless valuable continuing education courses at ESCs 4, 6, 10, and 11 over the past decade. They serve as a resource for support for our districts when we have questions, employ experts in the field who contribute to the knowledge of new and veteran educators, and help streamline trainings across our vast state, including those designated by TEA. The ESC's answer to TEA, yes, part of the problem, ding, 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 and then promote policies enacted by TEA and the legislature. And you said, I do know what I'm talking about. You are part of the GRIP, which she literally is. So if she works for it, I mean, if she is indoctrinated by the system. She can't see because she goes there. It feels good. They give her a nice lunch. She sits there. She's away from the classroom. She's supposedly, learning something that's supposed to help her. What I would argue is there's no fruit, because we have the evidence that our education system is struggling to do the most basic things. And she's saying that no, it's good, it's great, it's a resource. Well, these resources aren't working. We have the evidence to show they're not working.
Mhm.
Instead of attacking the ISDs, let's attack the problem that has been driving the ISDs to failure. And this is it. Anything that they're doing that's not addressing the most basic thing, they're supposed to keep the children safe and to educate them. And I would also bring up Article 7 of the Constitution of Texas, where it says that it's supposed to be an efficient system. This is not efficient. And I think initially it was set up as economies of scale. That would make sense, that you would have a central, so you're not being redundant in your costs, each ISD having their own
Right.
massive centers. But we already have that. We have professional development centers inside our ISD. So there is redundancy. We don't need the ESCs. And you had a great suggestion for these urban districts, because there's a lot of talk about rural versus
Mhm.
urban and the needs of the rural districts. That's also a big conversation in this speaker race, is that
Right.
and versus the urbans. Well, the same thing's going on for grabbing for funding at the legislature for the rurals to stay afloat. They don't have the same money and the resources as the urbans. So you said let's have them adopt a rural district, and that's something that we could examine.
I mean,
Yeah,
that costs no money. I mean, that costs no money. I mean, and I could go into, well, they're talking about doing this with virtual ed. That's a whole nother. But,
yeah,
let a school district that has great outcomes adopt a rural school district. You don't need this ESC. You have suddenly recaptured $1 billion
right.
to
So
go
if you're
to.
looking for relief, that's part of
Yes.
the relief. You
Uh-huh.
have to cut the spending. And how do you cut the spending? And we can justify the cut of the spending because we know that it's not working. It's very simple. We don't need the contracts going through the ESCs.
Lynn, here's the thing. The legislature is beginning to hear the public that they've got to cut the spending. Will they be courageous enough to tell Mike Morath, no, we're going to start cutting your spending because it is so bloated. We have called over and over and over again for an external forensic audit of the TEA. We have yelled over and over that the taxpayer is being fleeced through the TEA. And every time I go to a hearing and they have invited testifiers, the testifiers are always somebody with a contract in their pocket waiting for the check. Yesterday's hearing was the first time that the invited testifiers were not people who were
Correct.
waiting for a check. And that was refreshing. Kudos to Brian Hughes, Senator Brian Hughes, because he did not do that. Hats off, hat tip big time. But
Yeah.
again,
But
money.
but we do have one criticism is that if they're going to bring in these testifiers, that's great, but I really believe we need these agency members in the hot seat and question them publicly on camera. I would love to see that. They should have brought TEA in there and said, why are you running AI through your agency? Why is AI grow? All the hypocrisy, because they're studying these things that the TEA is actually doing. They do have the power to repeal the bills that brought us these layers of bureaucracy. So I'm not for new bills. And I know you know that that we don't want to add more layers of bureaucracy. We need to repeal the bills that got us this. So we need to repeal the bill which was I believe Senate Bill 408 that brought us the education service centers that Dwayne Estes was so proud of. Now he's since passed, but his legacy lives on, and I would argue that it has been a legacy of failure, and that's unfortunate that we didn't recognize that the behemoth that we were establishing so many decades ago. You there?
Okay, so I don't know whether it's my end, your end, or if it's just that my phone has been hacked, but thank you for tolerating this inconsistency here. So, a
Well,
call to action. I'm sure maybe you've already done it, maybe you're wrapping it up,
oh,
but
you couldn't hear me. I'm sorry. Okay.
yeah.
Well, I was just saying that the redundancy and repealing the bills that got us here. Before we
Yes.
check out or sign off, I want to show people how to go to the TEA check register, because
Okay.
it's staggering when you see the money going through there. So you would just go to TEA check register. It'll pull up this page, and then it'll say listed alphabetically by vendor name. So you would go to R for region, and it'll bring up the region 10 or whatever region. Actually, it's not.
So
I have
Lynn,
it listed as ESC. It might be under ESC. Yeah, it's under ESC.
so let's put the link to that on familiesengaged.org.
Okay.
I'll talk to our great administrator of that and get her to add that so
Okay.
that people can go to
Oh,
familiesengaged.org
here
and
it
click
is.
on problems, and then they can link directly to that and see those education service centers. Let's make it super easy for people to see the dollars because it's overwhelming. And I know that one of our members is working on uh, a fiscal analysis of this, comparing to create a graph that shows the growth. So we'll have that out in the next 2 weeks as well. So anyway, it was great to record this today. Thank you for your work on this and continuing to focus on this. I know that I think was it you and Ewan that went by and took a picture of the Education Service Center?
No,
No,
that was
it's
Kath.
but anyway, I know that we've had different people stop by and
There
visit
is
to
one.
see if
Yeah, you can see it in Austin. They're the region 13, I believe it is. Yeah. No,
yeah.
that was CASA. Okay, well, yeah, thanks everyone. And we'll have this information in the body of this and on our website. Thanks so much.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.